Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Daffy's Roundtable. Today, I'm joined by a returning guest, Damian Mckay of Copperhead Customs. Have you ever wanted to restart your reptile room, start from scratch? I know I want to, and Damian is currently going through this. In today's episode, we talk about planning a reptile room using AutoCAD softwares to plan what the reptile room is going to look like before you even start. We talk about how and why he's redesigning his reptile room. And then we talk about the mindset of being a business owner in this industry. This is a super fascinating episode. There's a lot of really good tips for anyone that's planning to or currently working on redesigning a reptile room. And I think you're all going to enjoy it. But before we do that, allow me to thank Exoterra for sponsoring this podcast and making this episode possible. Exoterra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. Okay, without further ado, let's go check out how Damian is redesigning his reptile room. Everybody, please help me welcome Damian Mckay of Copperhead Customs. Damian, hello.
How are we?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Bit tired, but good.
Yeah, it's always the time difference. Always, you're always on the worst end. You're just waking up when this is happening.
Yeah, which usually isn't an issue, but we had daylight savings click over, and that's put us an hour ahead. So now instead of waking up at 4 o'clock, my body clock's waking me up at 3, which isn't great.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I guess it's even worse. But I'm surprised. So we won't get into daylight saving conversation here, but it's interesting because Canada's daylight savings changed a while ago, and yours is just changing now, which I guess
Yeah, I
is
think it's to do seasonally. I think it originated with farmers wanting to be able to squeeze more into their day or something. But
yeah. I heard there's certain places in the world that are stopping it.
yeah, I don't think America, like certain parts of America, do it, or I'm not sure, but it annoys me. My missus loves it because she hates coming home in the dark, but it
Right.
just
Okay, that
annoys
makes
me.
sense. Yeah. Cool. Well, anyway, aside from that, thank you very much for coming on. Once
No,
again.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm super excited to this episode. Let's just start it off with since you were last on. I know a lot has changed, and we're gonna kind of get into a little bit of it. But any significant changes in the reptile room?
Yeah, in the reptile room, there's some pretty significant changes because, well, I started playing around with different ways of growing plants in the vivarium. So I made a living wall that had a misting system that points at it, and that soaks into the moss, and then the plants can grow up the wall. And it worked really, really, really well. So then I was like, okay, well, what if I did a whole enclosure with all 3 walls with this sort of system? But I'll do a drip system that runs down the inside of the wall. And that was working really well. And then I came home one day and the whole room was flooded.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Clearly, we have a lot to talk about. I'm very excited. So why don't we before we get into some of the changes, actually, why don't we kind of give a bit of a refresher.
yep.
Where are you currently? What is Copperhead Customs? Just really quickly, because people should go back and listen to the last episode if they haven't. But quickly, what is Copperhead Customs, and where is Copperhead Customs currently at? And then we can get into what's happening in your reptile room, kind of.
Yeah. Okay. So Copperhead Customs is a company that I started 4 years ago with the intention of making reptile enclosures more functional and focusing on the animal's behaviors so I can make a more species specific habitat rather than just here's an enclosure with a hide, a water bowl, and a heat lamp. So I do that by creating artificial rockwork primarily, but I study each. So if I get a client, they're like, I've got a carpet python. Well, I look into the natural behaviors of that species and then create my design for all my rock work and everything around that.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Okay, and then as Copperhead Customs is as a is your business, and then the stuff you're doing at home is kind of just as a hobbyist, right? It's not all intertwined, is it?
The only way it's intertwined is because people saw what I was doing for myself and started messaging me wanting me to do it for them.
Cool.
Other
Okay.
than that, like I'm not breeding or anything like that. I just use my enclosures to inspire other people to want to push things further as far as their reptile keeping goes.
Very cool. Okay. So now that we've got a bit of a refresher out of the way, um, tell us what happened. So you were saying the enclosure started leaking. Is that sort of what inspired all the plans that are coming?
Yeah, yeah. So a while back, I went to a business seminar that was held by Gary Vee, and one of the speakers
That's
said
awesome.
that the most successful business model is to find problems and solve them. He's like, people will pay for that all day because they don't want to have to deal with the problem. They'd rather pay you to do it.
Okay.
So the problem initially that I was having was I was running out of space for plants, and I wanted more plants and I wanted less fake plants. So that inspired doing the living wall. And the first iteration of that worked really well. And then I made the second iteration doing a full enclosure with it. But instead of a misting system, like a misting nozzle, I did a drip line down the inside of it. That was working really well. The plants were growing really well. And then, yeah, I came home and the room had flooded. And I'm not sure if it was the enclosure itself that let go or if it was something with the piping. I'm not sure because I turned it on to try and work out what was going on and I couldn't see any issue. But the whole room was flooded and it's a carpeted room. So I had to move all of the enclosures off of the walls. I've had to replace the skirting boards.
That's the worst.
Um, yeah, dry the whole room out. The enclosure that flooded was on top of another one. They both got water damage. And then in the process of moving the big enclosure, I snapped two of the caster wheels off of it. So it all just went
And that's because
downhill.
of the damage, right?
Yeah, well, I think that enclosure has been running pretty much since the start of Copperhead Customs. So they're melamine enclosures, which people say you can't do bioactive in because melamine chipboard, if it gets wet, starts to disintegrate. What people don't realize is the outside coating on melamine is actually waterproof or water resistant. So if you use silica in your joints, you can get away with putting moisture into the enclosures. But over a period of 4 years, you do get to a point where it starts to deteriorate. You can see sort of a rippling in the surface of the melamine. And yeah, I think the board had gone a bit soft and there was too much weight. So yeah, I think the board probably had softened up a bit because I put a lot of water into these enclosures. Um, and yeah, snapped the casters off of it because it was too heavy and it had sort of settled into the carpet. So instead of rolling, it pulled on it. So then I had to use a car jack to jack up the enclosure and remove the other caster wheels
Wow. Okay.
and sit it flat on the ground. The one that leaked and the one under that got water damaged, I've decommissioned those. I'll be dismantling those hopefully today. So the only ones that went untouched was this one here, which is my 4x4, and the one above it, which is a converted Reptile 1 enclosure.
Is that two tanks behind you? Where are the plants coming from? Is that a
So
second?
this is the big one, and
Okay.
then this is a 4x4, and they're in like an L shape. So I'm like sitting in the corner of them.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, do you want to maybe dive into your plans of like the new reptile room?
Yeah, so for a while I've been thinking about um,
I'm just pulling
making
up
an
some of the
enclosure
pictures here.
design that's specific to what I do, that's specifically designed for growing live plants, having misting systems, having water features. Um, so I was like, well, why not use this as a bit of inspiration to start from scratch and redesign the room? I've started out, I have a piece of CAD software on the computer that is called Shaper 3D. And that allows me to 3D render, and I can do exact measurements and work out what's going to fit where, what the most efficient use of the space is, um, and how I can do things in the best way possible.
So just before we continue, could you maybe break down sort of like I'm pulling up the pictures you send me, but could you break down sort of how it works? Like, are you
Yeah,
measuring the size of the room and then the size of, like, yeah, if you could explain, just for the people who are listening and not looking as I pull up the pictures. But this is very cool, and I think um like a very unique way to kind of pre-plan a reptile room, and I think more people would enjoy doing this if they knew it was a thing.
yeah. So the software has two versions. There's a free version, and then
Okay.
there's a version that you have to pay for. It's quite expensive, but really all it does is it allows you to save the files in different formats, and it allows you to save there's a feature in it where you can put different materials. So the one that I sent you, you can use it, but you can't save it. um, so what I did is I measured up the room, and then in the program you just trace out the shape that you want. And so I traced out the floor plan basically, and then I measured the space and go, okay, what can I fit in this space? I can fit two 4-foot footprint enclosures. And then I measured, I'm going to go floor to ceiling, so the full height. So when you walk into the room, there's not going to be a gap above the enclosures or anything.
I'm
Um, so
for
they're
some
going to
reason still
be,
looking,
yeah,
and I'll put the picture for people to see it more clearly. But that's kind of what he's currently talking about. Sorry, proceed.
yeah. So I've completely changed the layout of the room as well. So I've made it so the back wall is going to be like a seating area. I'm going to get like probably like a vintage armchair of some kind.
That's awesome.
And so I can sit and view the whole thing. The wardrobe cavity, I'm going to remove the doors and completely kit that out. So the top shelf will be covered because that's just storage, but the entire bottom, the wardrobe doesn't get used for anything. So I was like, well, I'll just make enclosures that slot straight into that cavity. Um, and then, yeah, the rest are going to be floor to ceiling, which will be this side will be two enclosures, and it'll be 4-foot, 4-foot, and 8-foot tall. And then this one will be the same length, so 5 foot, but it'll be 8.5 foot tall.
That's awesome. Do you, so okay, so
So everyone's getting an upgrade size wise, so which is my silver lining on everything happening.
yeah, okay, so that's awesome. So first of all, are you going to be building all the enclosures yourself, I assume?
Yeah. So commercially for customers, I work with another company that build the enclosures, and then I kit them out. I do have experience in building enclosures, but because I do everything on my own, it's more detrimental for me to be spending time on the enclosures
Right.
than it is when I can use that time to build better backgrounds, do more research and stuff like that. So sort of a conquer and divide tactic there. But the future of doing enclosures that's specifically for doing live planted setups. That's going to be just on me, and I'm going to start with just 2 fixed sizes. So instead of doing custom sizes for people, it's just going to be, this is what I have available.
And how does it work? You kind of like something they can fit into an enclosure?
No, so I'm going to use completely different products than what we're seeing used on the market, and it's essentially going to be a hybrid between a display reptile enclosure and a greenhouse.
Cool. And it's going to come in 2 sizes.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with 2 sizes, and they're going to be big. It'll probably be either a 4x4 and a 4x6, or a 4x4 and a 3x4. I haven't quite decided yet, but I want to do it in, so problem solving again. One of the issues I see with the current market of reptile enclosures is when you need to upgrade, you're stuck with an old enclosure that you've got to get rid of, or people then just fill it because they have it and end up in over their heads with too many animals and not enough space. So I would like to make a modular system where you can upgrade your enclosure by adding onto it, rather than having just waste product at the end.
What do you mean by that?
So say you've got a 4x4 enclosure and your snake outgrows it. Rather than getting rid of this, I want to make a system where I can take this side wall
and add another side
and attach another enclosure.
That's very cool.
Which I've seen done. There are some companies that do it. I just don't like the way that they have done it. I don't think it looks as seamless as what I would like. But yeah, I'm going to, so overseas you see a lot of frame and panel design enclosures. We don't have that here. There's maybe one that does it. And a lot of people are going to PVC for doing this sort of stuff. And PVC is great in a lot of ways, but one of the things that's not great at is structural integrity. PVC enclosures tend to sag, which is a big issue. So the way that I'm planning on doing it, you're not going to have any of those issues, and you're not going to, like, you'll be able to put these enclosures outside and they'll be fine.
And it won't be PVC?
No, I'm not going PVC. I don't want to disclose too much because I'm still in the prototype sort of stage of it. But the plan is to prototype for a year and then hopefully release start of next year.
Cool. And then you said they're kind of going to be focused on facilitating live plants in there. Is there going to be like an arid version of this where you can do live plants?
Yeah, so again, with the modular sort of system, there's going to be different types of base units that accommodate for different things. So if you've got a burrowing species, there'll be a base unit for that. If you've got a semi-aquatic species, there'll be a base unit for that, and so on. So the idea is that you can just, do you have Subway over there, like the food chain?
Yes, yeah.
All right, so you know how you go to Subway and you just cherry pick what you want?
You build your own sandwich?
I want that, but for an enclosure.
That's okay. That's awesome. Yeah. And then would it be in terms of like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's like I need an extra I don't know if it's gonna be to that detail, but like I need an extra 2 feet of enclosure or whatever it is, and you can kind of tack those on.
Yeah, so there'll be so one of the things that I think would be a good one to have would be a corner unit that almost works like a bridge. So if instead of having that wasted space when you butt 2 enclosures into a corner and this is empty, have a piece that goes in there that can bridge the 2, so you've got a wrap-around enclosure.
That's
stuff
cool.
like that. There's just a lot of missed opportunity, a lot of wasted space, a lot of things function-wise, which I don't think is really that efficient. So my aim is to address and solve those issues. One of the issues that I see with bioactive enclosures and live planted enclosures is we're making an animal enclosure that can support plants as well. Whereas I would like to specifically design it to be just as much for the plants as it is for the animal.
Right. Like you, what you mean is like when we're keeping bioactive enclosures, the focus is on how important, how are the animals doing in there, all of that kind of stuff. Whereas,
Yeah, so what I see, like I've got quite an analytic sort of brain, and the way that I see bioactive enclosures is it's an animal enclosure that's being made to work for plants.
right,
I would like an enclosure that's designed just as much to support the plants as it is to support the animal.
okay, yeah, and I don't know if you, again, you said you're still in the prototyping stage. I don't know if you want to share more on what that means, but if are you talking, for example, by creating something like the drip wall you were mentioning earlier,
Yeah,
included in
something
setup?
that so for my enclosures, we'll use them as an example. I'm putting so much water into these enclosures that I feel like I've got a terrestrial enclosure that I'm making work for water.
Okay,
But the problem is when water goes wrong, it goes wrong in a really bad way.
right,
So I'm planning on all of these enclosures being based with fish tanks. So it'll be almost an aquatic system with land features rather than a land system with aquatic features.
cool. And that's
And that
for
way
your
I can put as much water as I want in and it's not going to leak because it's designed to hold the water.
okay, yeah. And is water seeming to be one of the big problems that you keep encountering at?
So the plants I've found the key to growing good plants is the humidity and watering them enough. And I find a lot of people are scared of watering them because their enclosures don't have good enough ventilation systems.
Right.
If the
And
enclosure has a good enough ventilation system, like a mesh top, then the enclosure won't hold heat because the heat just pumps down and then straight back out the top.
yeah,
So I want things like controllable ventilation. So using fan systems, using ducting systems, adjustable vents, that sort of stuff. I'd like to play around with like heated substrate because if you think about it, we're actually doing the opposite of what nature does. So we've got the heat bulb coming down, but the coldest part of the enclosure is the ground. In nature, if you go outside in the sun and put your hand on the ground is hotter than the air.
right.
So I feel like that's something that's missing in reptile enclosures, and I wonder if that contributes to things like egg binding, because really the ground level, we're not replicating nature at all.
Okay. Yeah. That's very interesting to think about. Do you think that the concern with that is having, like, let's say, heating from the bottom and then being, because you're constantly pouring water on top of it, maybe causing some kind of fire hazard or something, and that's why it's not being
Yeah,
done?
well, that is one of the issues. There are some heat mats out there that that's not a concern with. Zoomed make one that is it's for tortoises. It's like a hard plate with metal cabling and stuff. So, and that's I don't think it's waterproof, but it's water resistant. So that's one that I want to play around with. But yeah, I think the main things that I see missing is the ventilation systems because if you listen to what people say, all of my snakes should have respiratory infections. I was told you can't have misting systems. I was told you can't have live plants in with carpet pythons because it'll be humid and they'll get respiratory infections. In 27 years of keeping, I haven't had a single respiratory infection.
And that's because you're keeping it more humid than what people generally say. Is that what you mean?
It's humid, but I focus a lot on ventilation as well. But you've got to design your ventilation in a way that you're not losing heat.
Right. And you've kind of figured this out.
Yeah. So obviously, like the prototype, because I want to push it as far as I can. I don't want to just put an extra product on the market that's just a slight variation of something that already exists. So my design is going to be something that I have not seen commercially available. I've seen, like, the greenhouse boys from Germany and over in Europe?
Yes.
So it'll be quite heavily inspired by what they do, but with my own twist on it, because I want it to be almost more of a display enclosure than what they've got. It won't be as obvious that it's a greenhouse panel sort of wall. So that means more glass, which puts its own challenges in place. But yeah, that's why you got to do a prototype.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. I look forward to seeing it. Keep me updated on how that goes.
Yeah, I will.
Cool.
So yeah, the room will be floor to ceiling enclosures with fish tanks down the bottom. And that way I can have I can have drip walls, I can have misting systems. I actually want to move away from misting systems a little bit, because I find that, one, the snakes mess with them. They'll go and knock the nozzles, and next thing you come in and there's water pointing straight at the front glass.
Yeah.
So, but I want to keep at least one misting nozzle in there, because I noticed that they drink off of the surfaces more than anything else.
Right.
But there's a YouTube channel called Mini Biota, and he made a rain system out of a 3D printed mount and weeping hose.
Okay.
And the weeping hose is a type of hose that's used for watering gardens, and it's got like a permeable surface, so water actually leaks out of it, beads up on the surface, and then drips.
Cool.
So I would like to make a rain system using that, but I haven't done it up until this point, purely because I was worried that it'd be too much water going into the system. But if I've got the fish tanks, I don't have to worry about that.
Right. Okay. So, and will you actually have fish in the fish tanks?
Yeah. So for the drip walls, which is something that I wanted. Sorry?
So you're almost like building paludariums instead of...
Yeah, they'll basically be giant paludariums.
Cool. Yeah, sorry you were saying about...
Which is probably controversial for carpet pythons as well, but I'll be running these systems without animals in them and monitoring the humidity and adjusting the ventilation system until I get it to safe parameters. And then I'll be, to provide enough ground space, I'm going to put things like, so if I put a bucket full of soil into the fish tank, it's going to be heavy enough that it doesn't float, and then I'll just disguise that with with artificial rockwork.
Cool. So that'll be kind of sitting in, giving them the... Yeah. So will the bottom, the aquariums, the bottom, will they just be the bottom of the setup? There won't be anything else?
Yeah, so if you picture a bottomless enclosure that's designed to fit over the top of the fish tank, that's what I'm aiming for.
Cool.
The problem that I've run into is I don't have much money. And the most expensive part of the enclosures is going to be the glass. So I was like, okay, well, how am I going to do this? Do I make all of my enclosures prototypes for my new product and spend all that money on sort of an unknown, or do I work out a different way of doing it? And what I've come up with is, you've seen people keeping grow tents, right?
Yes, I have a grow tent downstairs.
Yeah. So I'm planning on framing out. So in Australia, I don't know if it's common in the rest of the world, we've got house framing that's metal, like, and it's quite lightweight, pretty easy to work with, and it's very cheap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to frame out the enclosures using this metal stud and track system, and then I'm going to get a thin core flute, and I'm going to skin the whole lot in the thin core flute. Because if you've watched Brian Barczyk's channel, their new zoo, something I noticed with their enclosures is they're just a metal frame and a universal rock have skinned the inside. So they almost don't have solid walls other than the universal rock.
Right. I haven't seen the videos, but that I can picture what you're saying.
Yeah, so I'm sort of looking at that going, okay, well, do I actually need to make walls on these enclosures considering I'm making rock work anyway? The only reason that I need walls is to keep the water inside the enclosure from the misting systems and stuff.
Okay, right.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to frame the whole lot, skin it all with thin core flute, because it's not structural. It's just to keep warm air in and keep moisture in. Silicon all the joins and then wrap the whole lot in rock work. And it's taken it down from about $1,000 in enclosure to about $500 in enclosure, including the fish tank.
Wow. Yeah, so
Now,
500 of that is just walling.
yeah,
That's crazy.
just the framing and the paneling. Yeah, it's very, very expensive. PVC, I considered doing it out of PVC. That's $100 to $120 a sheet. You're looking at 3 or 4 sheets per enclosure. I don't want to do melamine again because I feel like I've pushed melamine enclosures to the absolute limit. There's a product called Form Ply, which is like it's a plywood that can take moisture. That's still going to be limited to how much moisture.
And for how
And
long?
they're very heavy. Something I want to do is try and get more lightweight, especially after snapping the casters off, because that was purely because of weight. And I've wanted to dabble with paludarium sort of setups for a while. I just haven't done it because I was worried about the material of the enclosures not standing up to the moisture.
Yeah.
And the expense factor. But yeah, you got to make the best out of a bad situation. And I'm like, well, I'll just use this as the push to take things to the next level and provide more for my animals.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm not much of a builder. Like I don't build my own enclosures. I don't do anything like that. But Greg, Beneath the Canopy Exotics, I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. But you should chat with
What was
him.
the channel?
Beneath the Canopy Exotics. Yeah, he does have a YouTube channel, but he's more on Instagram. He's very good at this kind of stuff. Like the actual like building of the closures, and he has all these kind of same ideas. He's done something similar with the using the aquarium as the bottom of a setup. You should talk with him, brainstorm ideas back and forth. I think I think he could be of use. I wish I had more skills in terms of like actually building enclosures, doing stuff, but not me. But that's good. Okay, so kind of on the same chain of thought of like, okay, so got to make best of a situation. You're starting a new reptile room. I think there's a lot of like I think that's a dream for a lot of reptile keepers. Like if you ask me, it's like I'm like I would definitely restart from scratch and have plan things better. Have specifically where I would want to put every animal. So here's a couple of questions just based on that. First of all, with all the planning ahead, do you worry that if in a year or so you decide you want a new species, you want to work with something different, do you worry about making it so permanent that it's hard to make changes later?
Well, the funny thing is this stud and track system and the core flute is, it seems very permanent, but it's very easy to modify because I can just cut the core flute away and cut the metal framing with a pair of tin snips, and
Cool.
that'll be good to go. So that shouldn't be an issue, I don't think.
That's okay. That's interesting. And then now that you're getting this opportunity, how important do you think it is to really take your time and plan, so that you don't make the same mistakes?
It's essential. There's been a lot of things like people look at my reptile room and my setups and go, "Holy crap, that's a dream." But there was a lot of things about these setups that I didn't like.
Right.
The weight, the wasted space above them, um, the way I had it laid out wasn't as efficient as it could be. So I was having to sacrifice space that I would have liked to give more space to the animals, but I just simply didn't have enough wall space. I didn't have access to the outlet, the power outlet, so everything was run off of
Extension cords.
extension leads, which was a pain. And if I wanted to get to the outlet, I had to climb over the top of this enclosure to get back there. So the problem was I built this enclosure, or I had this enclosure built, and it wasn't actually designed for this room. It fit quite well in this room, but it wasn't designed for this room. So every day I would look at it and go, I could have gone 2 foot wider, I could have gone a foot taller, and all those little things just sort of bugged me and annoyed me. So now I can remedy all of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you've planned it on a CAD program. What are the next
Yep.
steps that you need to take?
The next steps, so I've got to get the fish tanks, because if I build the framing and the fish tanks aren't exact to the measurements that they're saying, then I've got to change all of the framing. So I've got to get the fish tanks in place. I'm going to start with the 4x8s and go from there. This one is going to be very expensive. So I've shopped around and I think I found the company that I'm going to go with for the fish tanks. But give me one sec. Cat's eating things it shouldn't. So I got them to quote a fish tank for the bottom of this one, which will be, because it's an unusual size and it's quite big. So the fish tank would be 5 foot long, 3 foot deep, and 450 high. So 450, what's that, like half a foot, I think? No, it's over a foot. I think it's a foot and a half. So that fish tank on its own is going to be $1,000.
Okay. Yeah.
So this one will be last. I think I'll do the framing and then make essentially a garden bed for the bottom of it until I can afford the fish tank. But the framing and everything will be light enough that when I can afford the fish tank, I'll just be able to lift the framing up, put the fish tank in place, drop it down, and it'll all fit seamlessly. Because that one's custom, I'm not worried about doing the framing first, because I can measure the framing and go, this is what size I need you to do the fish tank. Whereas the fish tanks for these are ones that they already sell.
Right. They're going to be standard sizing.
Yeah. Um, and it's surprising how much the price of fish tanks vary because originally I thought that I would get on Marketplace and find a couple of secondhand ones and go from there. But I couldn't find two that were the exact same. And I knew that if they weren't the same, it would annoy me.
Yeah. Need
Um,
that
so,
symmetry.
yeah. Um, so then I found this company and they're half the price, well, not quite half, but just under half the price of all of the other builders in the area. So I'm not sure where the prices for fish tanks come from, but it's it varies a lot. So if you're going to do something like this, I'd suggest you shop around as much as possible and plan for as much as possible, and don't just jump in, even though it's extremely tempting to just jump in and get the ball rolling.
Yeah. Are you going to remove everything out of the room, and then start bringing them all back in one by one? Or are you kind of just keeping things in place, building one corner, then moving things over?
So the two that got damaged, I've already only one of those had an animal in it at the time. The other one was growing in. I converted two glass display cabinets um, into enclosures, and they've gone in there. That's just a temporary enclosure. So then I'm going to break these down. Uh, these will go onto the wall that I've just finished repairing, and they'll be out the way, which will open up this whole wall to do the framing on. This is too big and heavy to move, so that's going to stay there until I replace it, and then it'll just be broken down.
Fascinating. Very cool. And then, okay, so maybe jumping off the. Is there any other cool things you want to tell us about the reptile room?
Um, oh yeah, there is one. I want to make a sound and lighting effect for the room itself. So when the misting systems come on, it plays like a thunderstorm and
Thunderstorm?
like has lightning and stuff.
That's
That
awesome.
that's something that I've had in my head for a long time. I just haven't worked out how to do it because all of the lightning lights, like the LED lightning sort of setups that I've seen, they go different colors, and I don't want it different colors. I just want it white.
Right. Like a
Um,
natural colored storm.
yeah, because I mean, well, I've never seen pink lightning in nature before, so
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that having the sound and the light would positively affect the snakes, like making it even more natural?
I don't think it'd affect the snakes. I just think it'd be really cool for me.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Fair, fair. Yeah, why not? Yeah. I mean, we build these rooms to enjoy them, right? So if that extra step um makes you enjoy it even more, then why not? It would be cool to see how like they react, because you're almost completing a little more of this the natural cycle. Like, I know you'll never really be able to. I mean, it would be cool if you'd be able to like change the atmospheric pressure in the room as it rained, or do all these kind of things. But I feel like it's one step closer. Now you're getting the rain, the mist, the rain. You're getting the sound, and you're getting the change in light. It goes dark to starts flick, like the lightning flickering. If it's one more step closer to it be completely what they're experiencing in the wild.
Yeah, one of the things that I would like to do would be, and it won't be hard with the way that I'm doing the ventilation system, is have a wind system. So
Uh-huh.
when it's raining, like the wind actually picks up and I can have
Yeah,
fans blow wind through.
that's cool. Yeah.
Because I feel like that's sort of something that's missing. And so many of these animals, they do rely on the cues from nature to tell them to do certain things. Like you hear about green tree pythons and emerald boas getting constipated, and it turns out that it's all to do with rain and that people are putting them in rain chambers. But well, why not make an enclosure that can support that?
They put them in rain chambers to help the constipation
So
pass.
they don't go to the bathroom because the area is so dense with predatory animals that they don't want to give away where they are by defecating, they'll go during the rain because it disguises it and dilutes it. And all of these people were having prolapses and all of these issues, and they've worked out that, one, it is dietary as well, but hydration is a massive thing, and they're not getting. So I've even noticed it with carpet pythons. The water bowl is great, but I can tell you right now, all of my animals will go for a misted rain over the water bowl every single time. If I turn the misting on, without doubt, they will start drinking.
Yeah.
And I've had stagnant water, well, not stagnant, like still water, running water, and misting, and they'll pick the misting every single time.
Even over the running water, that's interesting.
Yep. So I thought, so I keep all carpet pythons, and I thought, okay, well, they've found along creek systems. Like, I wonder if running water is kind of like with chameleons, how they won't drink unless the water's moving. I'm like, I wonder if that is part of their nature, because you see people all the time and they have issues with shedding and this, that, and the other. And I was like, I wonder if it's to do with the fact that we only offer still water. So I decided to offer all three in this enclosure. So I had a pond with a waterfall, I had a misting system, and I had the misting system fill up. I made a like a dish basically in the rockwork, and the misting system would fill that up. I thought that it would be the running water. I'm like, they're going to go for the running water. Like, the misting system really was mainly for the plants. As soon as that misting system went off, drinking off the plants, drinking off their body, drinking off the rockwork. I saw them drink once from the waterfall, and it was only because I put them down there. And I've seen them drink if the misting system hasn't gone off and there's still a puddle in the little dish section. I've seen them drink from that puddle. But it's only if the misting system hasn't gone off for a while.
Interesting. How frequently does the misting system go off? Is it once a day?
I had it going off every 3 days.
Oh, okay.
It's currently not connected. I'm currently just misting by hand because of having to move everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was going off every 3 days. So gave enough time for things to dry out a bit before it went again.
Fascinating. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so maybe we'll quickly jump off that onto some of your other projects that you're working on. You mentioned you've kind of expanded what you're building enclosures for now. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so I had a client contact me and he goes, would you do an enclosure for sugar gliders?
Okay.
I was like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I don't see why not. And he goes, well, it's not so much an enclosure, it's more of a room. I'm like, okay. And he sends me some photos. I'm like, I think I'm going to have to come and have a look. So I come to his house and he shows me the space, and you walk into his garage and there's a door. The door's got a hole in it. I'm like, that's odd. You open the door and it goes into like a little courtyard that goes 3.5 meters tall, has mesh on top, and then has a window that you can view into the courtyard from inside the house. And he goes, so this is essentially their play area at night. He puts the cage next to the door and has a ferret tube, access tube that goes to the door. And then, being a nocturnal animal, come nighttime, they go through the tube, go outside, climb around. And he's like, it works really well. They use it, but I'd like it to be set up more of a habitat, like more nice to look at, more functional space. Would you be interested? I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'd be interested. I was like, but how did you find me? Like, because I'm known in the reptile world.
Yeah.
like, how'd you actually find me? And he goes, oh, I just Googled habitat creation and then the city that we live in. And he's like, you were like the third person that came up,
Okay,
which
moving up in
I
the
didn't
world.
even know that I would come up on Google that easily.
That's cool. Yeah. Oh, you never Googled yourself?
Not until he said that. I have since.
Yeah, yeah. I've Googled myself a few times. It's very cool to see what comes up. Okay, cool. So, okay, before we jump off that, or before we continue with that, is it you're saying it's still inside the house, but it's kind of open air, or is it completely leading these sugar gliders to an outside cage, like almost like an
It's
apiary outside?
essentially an outside cage because it's open top, but the walls are like one of the walls is the garage, one of the walls is the house, and then there's like wraparound walls that are solid as well. So it's just this little courtyard that he specifically had built into his house specifically for his sugar gliders.
That's awesome. Okay. And so have you already done this project? Are you currently working on it?
No, it's my next one on the books. I've just got to finish off. I'm doing a enclosure that's the same size as this, um, but for magnificent tree frogs.
Okay.
So I've just got to finish that one off, which is going to be like a full Kimberley Ranges style. And then once that's done, which should be probably within a week, then the big project starts. Um, going to take me probably a couple of months to complete.
Okay. Yeah, it seems
Um,
like a big project.
yeah, because he doesn't just want rock work for it. He wants me to landscape the whole bottom of it. He wants waterfall. He wants me to provide all the plants.
How
So if
many
you've ever seen, there's a channel both on YouTube and Instagram that I really like called Biotope Gallery. It's
No,
a
I haven't.
crew out of Korea, and they do some absolutely incredible work.
What's
And
the
I've
name?
been
Sorry,
thinking
Biotope
for a
Gallery.
long time it would be amazing to have that here. Like, there's nothing like that in Australia. Um,
Material that took 2 years. The process of creating a biotope gallery. I think I found them. Cool.
their
Channel
work's
looks cool. I will check
absolutely
it out.
incredible.
I will check it out.
But they
Yeah.
do large scale, they do displays, they do vivariums, terrariums, landscaping projects, all sorts. So this guy contacting me has made me think more about what I could be doing with what I do. Um, there's a lot of people over in Europe are doing fake rock like feature walls and having lighting. Um, you can do landscaping, um, doing setups for mammals. Like, I'd never even really considered. I considered doing something for my cats, doing like a cat run and making it more naturalistic. Um, but you could do it with all sorts of animals. You could do it with ferrets. Like,
Do you think
so it
that's
really
the
sort of opened my
future?
mind to what it could be done with.
Yeah. Do you think it's the future of small animal keeping? Like, I don't know how it is over there, but like in terms of like hamsters and sugar gliders and all these things here, everyone's still keeping them in, um, or keeps them in uh, metal
A
cages.
cage.
Almost, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
metal cages like a bird almost or something. Do you think that this is the future of, like, do you think they'll become more like reptile keeping, where there'll be like bioactive landscape background builds for these animals?
I think if you open people's mind to the possibility that they can have something that looks better than essentially a bird cage, then I think it would be.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of people's worries with reptiles also cross over there. Like for example, if you were to do that with like let's say a hamster, um, how frequently are you going to see this hamster, right? Which I
Yeah.
guess
And
like think about
that's
it, it
the
kind of
issue.
applies for reptiles as well. Like the more you options you give them in their cage, odds are the less you're going to see them, because they're going to be utilizing all these spaces. But Yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends if somebody's more of like a I want to watch my pet, or if somebody's more of like a I need to cuddle my hamster every night. Not that I keep hamsters. I don't know what people do with their hamsters, but like, as an
The
example.
the thing that you see though, it's like, so I used to have ferrets. I used to have, I think we had 5 at one point.
Yeah,
And I look at how I kept them back then and go, I would do it so differently now.
right.
Um, the thing that you do, like you get a new animal, you're like, I want to handle it lots, but then life gets in the way and you handle it less. And the other thing I've noticed is with naturalistic habitats, you create a more confident animal.
Yeah,
So my snakes will sit out in the open because they feel like they can get away, they feel safe. Um, and that's even young animals. Like, I don't even need to provide hides because the setups give them enough hiding opportunity, enough security that they don't feel like they need to be hiding all the time.
yeah.
So
No,
I
that
don't
makes
know if
sense.
that would cross over to mammals or not, but I also think people are quite pretentious, and I think they would prefer to have something that looks really nice that
Yeah,
houses an animal than something that just looks like white plastic bars.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And I also think to a certain extent, especially like if it's less of like I think the concept of I have 100 snakes or whatever it is purely, and I could be wrong, it's purely a reptile person thing. I think in general in other pet industries, they're having like less pets. Like I don't think somebody has, and again I could be wrong, I don't know, but I don't think anybody's keeping like 100 hamsters. So I think when you have less, you're more willing to do, like you're gonna want to set your one pet up a lot nicer than you're gonna want to set up 50 of them, just purely even for cost, in terms of cost.
And
Um,
I think like a lot of it is, so like snakes, for instance, are very they can be very sedentary animals, right? So it's like, okay, well, if I have 10 of them, the
I might have
likelihood
more likely
is
to keep
that
them.
one of them is going to be doing something. But if you make your setups just as interesting as the animal, then I find that need goes away. Like, there's other animals that I would like to get, but my standards for enclosures are so big. Like, I would like to get olive pythons. They're one of the species I would like. But if I'm keeping a carpet python in a 5 by 6 by 3, can you imagine what I would want to keep an olive python in? Like,
Right.
it
Yeah.
would be a walk-in exhibit,
Yeah.
and I just don't have the space to do it. So until I do, which I will one day, um, I'm just going to give the animals that I've got as much space as I can possibly give them.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. And on that, I like that, and I will one day. I like that. Like it's gonna happen. You got to manifest
Oh,
it.
it'll
So
happen.
yeah, I like that. So on that same kind of, maybe we'll jump quickly to almost like your mindset towards this, and just being like you are definitely an entrepreneur. You're working on your own animals, you're working on your side business. We were talking before the episode, you were saying you're still working full time. So um can you tell me a little bit about, where your head has to be at, or where your head's at to going into all of these projects, and just like your mindset as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So I've never been 100% satisfied working for someone else. And it took me a long time to realize it. And I'd beat myself up and I'd be like, oh, you're just being lazy. And it wasn't that, it was just I wasn't ever satisfied working for someone else. And I've always been artistic and I've always been into art. And as an artist, you're like, oh, I just imagine if I could just make and sell art, that'd be great. Which essentially I'm doing that now. And you don't think about it when you're doing it, that that was always the dream, was to be able to do that. because being an entrepreneur and running a business is an absolute roller coaster. The first 12 months of running my business, I was like, this is fantastic. People are starting to recognize my work. I'm making good money. And then the guy that I was working with, things went south with him. He's since gone bankrupt. Coming out of that, I was like, okay, I'm going to learn from that. At the time, I was like, well, that's it. That all my work's gone. Like that's
Right.
all of my revenue
You're
was coming
trapped.
through him.
Yeah.
So I was heartbroken. I'm like, this could be like the end for me. But I stayed disciplined. I stayed active, kept putting myself out there. Teamed up with some other guys, the guys from Reptiles that I currently work with. So I had that low. Now back into the high. I'm like, all right, well, I need to make sure I'm doing things properly. So I set the business up better. Started getting more involved, teaching myself all the tax side of things, or at least I thought I'd taught myself all the tax side of things, and then went to an accountant, and he was like, "No, you stuffed your tax up last year. I'm going to redact that." And then I got slapped with 2 years worth of tax at once. So then I had to spend the next year and a half paying off a $10,000 tax debt. So now I'm making no profit. I'm working myself to the absolute bone. I feel like all I do is work and stress about money.
Yeah. And you feel
So
like
then you hit that low, and then you get inspired by something and you start working towards that, and then you get your high, and then that idea doesn't work. So I was like, one of the things that I see with businesses is I don't think a single faceted business model is really viable in today's world. Like you have to have multiple revenues. So I look at it like the hospitality industry. When you go to a pub to have a meal, you're not making, like they're not making their money on that meal. That meal gets you through the door, and then they're making the money off of the 5 drinks you have with that meal.
Yeah.
So if people are coming to me for the backgrounds, if I can't make a lot of profit off the backgrounds alone, then what other things, smaller items, can I tack on to bring in more revenue? Because cash flow is absolute key when it comes to business.
Right.
So the issue that I've run into is, so I was doing prints as well, so I had a cheaper option. So people would see the backgrounds, I'd catch their attention, they go, oh, I can't really afford that, or oh, this is only going to be his enclosure for a year and then he's going to get upgraded.
I remember,
and I would have something cheaper that I could offer them. Well, then I came up with all these images, launched them, and the first release, I was doing them on core flute so they could just slot in. The core flute scratches really easily. So then that sort of ruined that idea because I wanted it to be a like drop ship system, so it was not more work for me. That the core flute didn't work, so then I switched to vinyl, but that required more work from me because people didn't want to install them themselves, so then I was installing them. And then I ran into supply issues. The quality was inconsistent. The customer service was an absolute nightmare. They'd say they delivered something, and then they hadn't, and it'd show up at someone else's address.
This is the prince, right?
Yeah, this is the prince. So what was supposed to be a easy little side piece to the backgrounds to bring in more cash flow just turned into an absolute nightmare. So I put that on the back burner. I have found another supplier that does them on a PVC card, and they're very durable. So I need to, again, I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to prototype some for a long period of time, expose them to moisture, expose them to heat, test them with different animals, and make sure they're going to stand up, because the only way that it's worth my while if it's not taking time away from building backgrounds.
Right.
So I've got to find a way to make the business not single faceted. I can't rely just on backgrounds because I keep on changing the way that I'm doing it. So I'm now using a called a texture sprayer. It's a type of spray gun that can spray cement. So I'm using that to try and speed up the process, because the length of time that it's taking me to make them now, because I'm getting better detail, but it takes longer. When you work it out at an hourly rate, I'm paying myself about $9 an hour, which is not viable. So yeah, that becomes an issue. And now I've got to go, okay, well, do I charge more? And then it becomes less accessible. Or do I go more simple, sacrifice quality so it's quicker, which I don't want to do that. So the two options are I've got to get faster, or I've got to have other products on the market to fill that gap. So one of the things that I've done is I bought a greenhouse. So it's a tunnel soft shell greenhouse. Now, I bought a greenhouse because our permitting laws in Australia are really friggin' stupid, and I'm not allowed to put a shed that is going to be big enough for what I want on our property. You've got to get permits, and it's an absolute headache. What you don't need permits for is a temporary greenhouse under 100 square foot. 100 square foot is a lot of space. So either it's might be square meters, but anyway, I built this greenhouse which is 3 meters wide by 11 meters long, and I'm going to kit that out as my workshop. And then there's going to be individual stations. So rather than finishing one step, having to clean up, having to swap tools over, I can just move. Like, I finish carving it, I can move straight to the next stage, and each step of the process has its own workstation. So I'm hoping that that will allow me to speed everything up and increase my turnover. The other good thing about the greenhouse is, being that it gets really hot, it makes things dry quicker. So I had one that I was working on the other day, and it fell over and smashed part of the rock work. I was like, what am I going to do? I was like, I've got to get this finished in the next 24 hours. I was like, well, I'm just going to have to risk it, and if it doesn't work, tell them it's going to be late. So I made up a thick mix, blended it all, fixed the damage, put it in the greenhouse, and what before I got the greenhouse would have taken 3 days to cure, cured in 12 hours.
Because of the heat.
So, yeah, because of the heat. So it's going to make things dry quicker, which is going to speed things up. It's going to make things more efficient. And the other thing that I wanted to do is, I've started the last 12 months I've been working on building up my YouTube channel.
Nice.
And that's something that I want to do more, because then I can monetize, and then that'll help bring in a little more income as well. So I want each station to have like camera mounts and lighting, so it makes it easier for me to film, and then I can share more with people. And then so I'm in a group chat with Brad from Brad's Bioactive Builds and Riddler from Riddler's Reptiles, or Andrew from Riddler's Reptiles, and we bounce ideas back and forwards and talk a lot, which has been really good. And they've been on my back about starting a Patreon page. They're like, just do it, just do it. It's like, I've just got to stop dealing with the imposter syndrome and just do it. But one of the things I would like to do on that is have almost like a coaching tier, where if people want to learn how to do what I do, then that's where they can do it. So there'll be tutorial videos and all sorts of stuff to help people along the way, because I've now helped coach both Brad and Andrew through a couple of builds, and it was a lot of fun. The results were really good. They got a lot out of it. I got a lot out of it. So it is something I want to do more of, but it needs to be worth my time away from building paid jobs. So I've got to be making money off of it.
Cool. Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. And what kind of stuff are you going to be sharing? How you're doing the builds, like tutorials, or
Yeah,
just
so
kind of
like carving techniques, painting techniques, different techniques of building the structure of the rock work, how to achieve different styles of rock and whatnot. So the idea is to have an entire, almost like a school, of how to do it.
That's awesome. That would be very cool. You know, in the aquarium world, aquascaping, there is all of that. Like there are schools, there are tutorials, there's mentorships, there's apprenticeships, there's lots of competitions, and I really think that you know, Terrascape, which I mean to a certain extent, right? When you're building those backgrounds, when you're doing the rock work, it's just the Terrascape version um of aquascaping. I do think that there is a lot that needs to start happening, and you're obviously very talented at it, so you could be the one leading the charge to kind of create that niche. Like there's obviously already build off starting to happen and all that kind of stuff, but there's definitely more that, you know, more stages to take in that direction for it to become almost its own hobby, even more so than, you know what I mean.
Yeah. So it's funny that you bring up the build offs, because Brad was in the recent one at Tinley.
Was he?
Yeah.
The
So
one with
that was
Adam
the one
Wilson.
that
I actually watched that
I
video. I
helped him
don't
with.
remember who was on it. Yeah.
So I gave him a basic concept, and he was like, well, I'm not going to have time to do it with Zoopoxy, because he uses primarily Zoopoxy.
Right.
He's like, so I'm going to have to do it with dry lock. I was like, well, dry lock's more similar to how I do it. So we bounced ideas back and forwards, and he came up with his build. The thing that I think is missing from these build-offs is the online voting system. It doesn't work. It's too easy to manipulate. It should be done by either you do a voting system to get to the finals, or you have judges the whole way through. But I think the winner should be picked by judges, similar to how the aquascaping competitions do it. And it should be judged on things from aesthetics to functionality to species appropriation. Like, it shouldn't just be an online popularity contest.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the way they did it, I think is probably done for that reason. Like they're trying to engage with as many people in the
Yeah,
YouTube audience as possible. But I do think that, the like the in-person ones at least should be kind of like you said, judged by judges, or at least use the people to get to, as you said. There was one hosted. There's been a few that have been hosted here in Canada so far, and they're doing judges as well, but they're doing one judge, and I think you need like a panel of judges. I think
I think you need probably at least 3.
yeah. But it's cool. I definitely see it becoming a more prominent thing in the hobby in the near future for sure.
I think a good way to get the best of both worlds would be to have voting to get you to the finals. So, say you've got 50 people doing it, just random number.
Yeah.
The voting gets you into the finals, and then once you're in the finals and it's like, okay, this is your top 10, then it goes to a judges panel. And that way you're still getting enough attention, you're still getting the free advertising, the free marketing, but you end up in a position where the end results are fair and not just a popularity contest.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's makes sense. Am I muted? Okay, no, I just got there's a few times in this episode where I was like, I started talking and be like, oh, I'm muted. Um, yeah, and I agree, and I think there's more, even like just forgetting about the build offs, like we were saying earlier, like your schooling, your mentorships, teaching people how to do it, because it definitely is an art in the end of the day, and I think a lot of people would want to learn to be better at this art. So I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of potential in everything you're considering to do. That's awesome. Do you have any other big plans, um, other than the reptile room and starting to post content more often and getting on Patreon and all that?
Yeah, so the main big plan is the prototype enclosures that I'd like to release. The bioactive specific enclosures. The other thing that I would like to try, and I'm still trying to work out exactly how to do it, is I'd like to branch into education. I'd like to branch into like mentorship um, for new keepers, for young kids that have an interest. Um, so I'm sort of trying to work out how to do it. The original idea, here's another curveball. Um, so my idea was we were going to get a factory and make a bit of a storefront. Me and the guys from Yarra Reptiles. Since that idea um, was come up with, they've now bought a property, so they're not interested in renting something, and I can't afford to rent something on my own, which was another reason for the greenhouse, because I was like, well, I can't keep doing it the way that I'm doing it. I need a specific dedicated space for doing this if it's going to keep happening. Um, which sort of through, because my idea was once we had that space, I'll be able to do education. Um, now that I'm not getting that space, I'm like, okay, well, how can I do it? And I'm sort of thinking of, I don't know whether to do it just in person or do it online somehow, but would be to have like a club, and then you have your sort of club meets and we talk about different species. I can get guest speakers and stuff like that to help these kids um, think more appropriately when it comes to it, because you see so many people, they're like, oh, I got my first snake, how do I set it up? And then you just get your generic answers. It's like, well, you're all missing the part of looking at the wild
Yeah.
counterpart to this animal, looking at the actual habitat.
Learn the animal itself. Yeah.
Yeah, learning the animal itself instead of learning how to keep it. Because if you can't understand why your snake doesn't feel safe, then how are you going to troubleshoot the issues of not feeding, of being cage defensive? It's like, of course it's cage defensive. It's got one hide, and every day you're sticking your hand in there and poking it.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas, the other thing is like, oh, you can't put young, small animals in big enclosures. I was like, yeah, if the enclosure's empty, that's true. Because now it's an even bigger space for it to feel exposed in.
Yeah.
But I've found setting up these naturalistic setups, if you put them in there and it's set up in a way that supports their natural behaviors, supports their natural instincts, carpet pythons, if they're up high, they feel safer. If you do that and leave them alone for 2 weeks, they're fine. They're completely bomb-proof.
Yeah, I think
Now,
there's a lot
in
of
saying that, I do quarantine my animals for 12 months when I bring in a new animal. They're housed in a different room, have their own feeding tongs and everything. Mainly because, like, if I had a mites outbreak in these enclosures, it'd be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
So I do have quite strict quarantine protocol, which is something else that isn't taught. So I'm seeing all these gaps in people's knowledge of reptile keeping, and it's like, oh well, how am I supposed to learn if I'm getting mixed messages on Facebook groups? Who else am I supposed to learn from? And so many of these breeders, like the breeder that I got my first snake from, he was a lot of help. The breeders nowadays are just people that want to make a quick buck, or most of them. Not all of them, but most of them. And they're not interested in helping. They've got your money and they're on to the next. So I feel like we need more mentorship. I feel like that's something that is missing in a big way in the reptile industry. And that's another problem that I would like to solve.
That's awesome, man. You have a lot of cool plans, a lot of big plans, and you're gonna be very, very busy. But as long as you
Yep.
enjoy what you do, right? Like that's the big picture here is you're gonna be busy, but you're gonna be busy doing something you love. So it's you're
It's
gonna enjoy
enjoying
it.
what you do, but it's also having the discipline to ride out the hard times. Like, I deal with anxiety and depression and ADHD, and you've just got to be able to recognize it and go, yes, this is horrible right now. It's not forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Discipline and accountability go a long way. You've got to look at it and go, okay, why is it this way? If you keep on running into the same situation that's horrible to deal with, it's probably something that you're doing to create that situation, whether it be who you're hanging out with, who you associate with, how you're doing things.
Yeah.
An example was during my day job, I was getting very frustrated. And our supervisor at the time came out and was like, oh, it just seems like you hate being here. I'm like, I'm not hate being here. I'm just getting very, very frustrated with the lack of effort that people are putting in. And she's like, oh, well, maybe it's just because you're doing too much. Like, you're doing your business and you're working full time and, like, you're probably just burning yourself out. I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. And I dropped a day at my day job.
You
Now,
dropped a
I
day.
don't think that was what she expected. I think she expected, was sort of hinting that I shouldn't be doing my stuff. But I've looked at it going, no, you're right. I am trying to do too much. I am getting tired, and that triggers my anxiety, and then I get grumpy because of that. So I cut a day out of my day job and gave myself a dedicated day for the business, because then I didn't feel like I was constantly behind.
Yeah.
And it took that accountability of going, okay, well, I've got to sacrifice something. Something's got to change, otherwise I can't expect a different result.
Yeah. And when you're working full time as well, and you're doing your own business over the weekend, it definitely you feel like you're nonstop working. It definitely does burn you out.
Well, put it this way, I get up at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
I don't start my day job until 9 a.m.
Wow. Yeah. So you have
So that
4 hours of
I
work in
get
the
up at
morning.
4, I wake up, drink a liter of water, have a coffee, go and do a few hours of work, come inside, have breakfast, have a shower, get ready for work, go to my day job. And then I don't get home until about 6 p.m. If I've got a really tight timeline, I'll squeeze another hour of work in on the backgrounds after work. Come inside, have dinner, sit down for an hour, go to bed, do it all again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you prefer to do your work before work rather than, most people will go to work first and then come back and do everything they need to do. I'm like that. I'll wake up, first thing I do is like work, and then I'll get everything, all my like whatever editing or whatever else I need to do, I get it done all after work.
Yeah, well, it helps that I've always been an early morning person because that's what all of my jobs have required. But my wife has a very similar schedule to me. So I get up an hour earlier so I can fit more in. She gets up at 5, has a coffee, and then goes to gym for an hour. So that's her routine. So my routine now fits in with that, which makes it easier. And then the afternoons, we actually get to see each other for a couple of hours. Yes. Whereas if I was doing it after work, we would never see each other.
Right. Right. You'd be on completely different schedules. That makes sense. Yeah. That's cool, man. That's cool. Damian, thank you very much for coming on and having this conversation with me.
Thank you for awesome. Having me back.
Of course, and we'll have to have you back again as you start to put together the reptile room. Maybe you can come give us some updates.
Hopefully by the next time the reptile room will be done and I can show you how good it turned out.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'm gonna for those of you listening, I'm going to pop pictures that Damien sent me of the CAD program, if you're okay with that. I'll pop them on the screen somewhere because they're cool to see, and I think it's a very cool idea. I think it's cool that you're planning everything in advance and you kind of have a visual of what needs to be done rather than, like I don't even measure. Anyway, yeah, we already talked about it. I'm very curious to see how it progresses and what it ends up turning into, and yeah, and keep me updated, like staying updated with Copperhead Customs and what's happening with you on that front as well. It's cool that you're breaking out of the just reptiles and you're doing stuff for mammals as well. So if you're doing any cool mammal builds, I'd love to hear about that as well. So basically what I'm saying is we're gonna have to have you come back very soon and give us some more updates.
The mammal builds, and the other thing that I want to do is like large scale terraria. So just plants, no animals, because everyone loves houseplants. They don't do that well in most houses.
Yeah.
Like, for example, there was one that I had sitting on the kitchen windowsill, was barely holding on. I stuck it in this enclosure, and within a month, it was one of the most prolific plants in there.
That's crazy.
So, nice display plant. Yeah, nice, like, rather than just a jar, like a full wall piece terraria, I think could be really cool. It keeps your plants safe from children and pets, but you still get to enjoy them, and it provides a better growing environment for the plants as well. So I think that's something else I'd like to dabble with.
There's a few people here in Canada that that's their business. They'll go put in like a moss carpet for you or a moss wall or a plant wall or whatever. I'll remind me after this, I'll send you some profiles to check out, and maybe that could be something
that'd be good.
Start including into your Copperhead Customs as well, because it's definitely a good idea. I think a lot of people are moving towards like, how do we greenify spaces that we're constantly in, right? So
I think that's because people are realizing that a lot of the depression that we're experiencing is because we're not spending enough time in nature. I think people are starting to cool on to that.
Facts. Yeah, 100%. It's about time people do as well. I agree. Yeah. That's awesome. But anyway, yeah, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. Please let everybody know where they can find you.
Okay, so I am on pretty much all platforms except for Twitter. I don't use TikTok very much, but I am on there. It's Copperhead Customs under everything. Please go and subscribe to the YouTube because that's the one I'm currently trying to grow the most. I'm very active on Instagram. The next most active would be YouTube and then Facebook. Facebook, I mainly just post to groups. It's sort of my marketing model. But yeah, if you want to find me, Instagram or YouTube are the main two.
Cool. And those links will
Copperhead
be in the
Customs for
description.
both. And look for the logo.
I love it. That's a sick logo too. That's a sick logo. Yeah, all those descriptions, all those links will be in the description. There will be no descriptions in the description. No, I'm just kidding. All those links will be in the description. Thank you all very much for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.